Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute. I know we have like a lot of catching up to do. We are trying a new mic out today, as you can see, so bear with me as I learn and go through this process of having good quality content. I know I've been MIA in the last few months. I've actually been able to travel to 7 different countries. Crazy, I know. I do work in the travel industry, and back in June, I was able to join one of our tours, which was so exciting because this tour allowed me to see 5 different countries. I live in the United States, and before this year, the only country I've ever been to is Mexico. So this year has honestly been insane. So welcome to part 1 of my travel series of 2024. And today is where we actually get to venture to Switzerland. So exciting. This trip was my first time going to Europe, and I feel like Switzerland is like the best country to kick off with. It really is just visually so insane to see. Of course, I'll be sharing the day-to-day activities, food, sites, etc. Just everything you need to see to help plan your own trip. So sit back, relax, make yourself some tea, and let's get into the Switzerland adventure. This trip was in June of this year. It is September. It's been a minute. So in June, I hopped on a plane and headed to Zurich, Switzerland, which is where this whole tour started. I was all by myself, so that was really nerve-wracking going overseas for the very first time alone. And you know, life starts where you're most uncomfortable. All I had was my personal item, my backpack, and my carry-on. So a 10-day tour in Europe. We packed that baby tight, but it definitely made traveling easier because I didn't have to worry about lost luggage or anything like that. I do live in Texas, so I did have to fly out to Washington first. And then from Washington, my flight was straight to Zurich overnight. The flight was like 11 hours, if I recall correctly. And your girl is not good at sleeping in planes. Just can't do it. Thankfully, you know, Harry Potter came through. I watched like 2 of the Harry Potter movies. And I also watched Lisa Frankenstein, which I recommend. I arrived in Zurich around the late morning and met up with a tour group. And then we actually had a tour bus, which is really great. It obviously made me navigating my first trip in Europe very easy. My second trip to Europe this year, I actually did travel with my now fiance, so we had to figure out the logistics on our own, and it's totally doable. But for the first trip in Europe, especially when you're by yourself, a tour group is the way to go, in my opinion. It just made the whole thing so much more comfortable. We drove right into Zurich to explore and check out the city. It was like kind of a rainy day, I'm not gonna lie, but for me, rain is like an aesthetic and a vibe, especially when you're surrounded by beautiful architecture. Obviously, first time in Switzerland, I was stoked just to be there. We walked around the city. Of course, I was very much a little jet lagged, but honestly, when you're on the high of being in another country for the very first time, that overrides the jet lag for me personally. I was kind of hyped, not gonna lie. We walked all the way down to Lake Zurich just to check that out. From what I noticed, a lot of Switzerland's towns and cities are actually built around their lakes, so that was really cool to see. We didn't go on a cruise on the lake. On the next day, which you'll see later in the video, we did have that opportunity, so stay tuned. And then I went off with the tour guide because they technically work for the same company that I do, and we went off to get lunch, left the tour group, let them go do their own exploring, and they actually took me to what is the oldest vegetarian restaurant in the world, which is in Zurich, Switzerland. It's called Hittel Bistro. It'll be on the screen because I'm sure I'm going to butcher so much pronunciation. Really glad we went there. Obviously, everything is vegetarian, hence the name and the legacy, but it was very much like buffet style from different regions of the world, all vegetarian options. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little pricey, but when in Switzerland, you do have to expect a pricier experience. For me, it was worth it at least to check out once, because again, it's the oldest vegetarian restaurant in the world, so kind of cool. And the food was really good. We ate outside on their patio, relaxed. For me now, when I travel, I really just enjoy walking around the city. I get my freaking steps in, girl, and I try to literally see every single street I can. That habit definitely started here in Switzerland. There's just so much beautiful architecture. There's adorable markets outside as well, especially in Lucerne, which you'll see. We did get to see what is the biggest clock face in Europe, and we just got to walk through different bakeries, flower shops. It was all cute vibes. Afterwards, we linked up with the group again, and we headed out to the Lindt Home of Chocolate factory. Of course, Switzerland's very big on their chocolate. We didn't actually get to see the factory itself, but we went inside to go to the cafe, try out some coffees, chocolates, go through their store, and they had a really cool fountain as well that poured real chocolate through the building. Very Willy Wonka vibes. It was definitely cool to see. After we were done with the chocolate factory, we drove out of Zurich and headed to our hotel for the night so we could catch up on some much needed sleep. I was a zombie at this point, and we stayed at the Art Hotel. I did eat at the hotel for dinner, nothing to write home about, got some Z's. I crashed, got some good sleep, and then went into day 2, baby. More refreshed, more revitalized, ready to take on the day and see what more Switzerland has to offer. Hello there, friends. It is day 2 of my tour in Europe. Right now, I'm staying in Olten, Switzerland, and today we are going to see the Swiss Alps and Lucerne. So far, so good. People in Switzerland are so nice. It's been such a fun time and privilege to be here. We still have a little bit of France, a little bit of Italy, and then Barcelona, Spain at the very end. So stay tuned, but let's go ahead and explore Lucerne. After a little breakfast at the hotel, we got into that big tour bus and headed out to Lucerne, Switzerland, which is probably one of my favorite cities I have traveled to so far, even after seeing 8 different countries and many different cities within those countries. We, of course, saw the Lion Monument first. Definitely, if you're in Lucerne, this is a must-see. It's just one of the staples in Lucerne. It's a sandstone statue, which commemorates the Swiss guards slain in the 1792 Paris storming of the Tuileries. It was definitely cool to see. Of course, there was a lot of tourists gathered around it, so just be mindful of that. If you are planning your own trip, maybe try to hit it a little bit earlier in the day where there's a smaller crowd. We went through all the cobblestone streets and just checked out the architecture. It was so beautiful. At this point, I separated from the group to explore, and of course, I went to Chapel Bridge, like probably the #1 thing to check out in Lucerne. I mean, you can't miss it. It's like right in the center. And it's just the most iconic site in Lucerne, Switzerland. You have to walk through it, take your time, enjoy. This is a covered bridge which dates back to the medieval days, and there's colorful murals overhead. Of course, we had to get some content of ourselves with that awkward posting of your phone when you're traveling alone, dramatically looking into the distance. It's just, it's mandatory, especially if you're a travel vlogger like I am. Man, Chapel Bridge was beautiful. After that, I went off on my own to check out the Sam Lung Rosengart Art Museum, which features a lot of Picasso's work. This is definitely one of the top moments in my trip because I was just all by myself. I had some headphones in, vibing in an art museum. Honestly, if you've never done that, just go to an art museum by yourself, get some headphones, earphones, whatever, play a curated playlist specifically for the activity, and just vibe out, take your time because you're by yourself, no one's rushing you, and you'll feel all the peace in the world. Of course, if you can do that in another country like I did here, even better, but even just your local art museum, I highly recommend because the vibes were vibing. I was just truly like euphoric in this moment. But yeah, this museum was really cool, not huge, but definitely had a lot of different rooms. There was a good amount of artwork to go through in a couple of hours. It was made in 2002, so it's a pretty new museum, not historic by any means, but it did have a lot of work from Pablo Picasso as well as Paul Klee. And there was I think 1 or 2 Monets there as well, which was amazing to see. Super impactful moment because for me, Monet is one of my favorite artists. Of course, I could have spent 6 hours at this art museum just by myself, but I still wanted to see more of Lucerne and just get as much as I could out of it, knowing I'd only be there for the day. I did walk by the main train station, which of course is beautiful as Lucerne, Switzerland would have it. I did go into the Jesuit church, which was a Catholic church. The church here was just beautiful. It was also my first church I've ever seen outside of America. I'm not really a religious person, but I can definitely adore the architecture and the art and details that they put into these churches back in the day. And I really wish humanity would go back to that rather than the ultra modernism that's happening, but that's a whole nother subject. Anywho, this was the first church that I saw in Lucerne. It was just jaw-dropping, insane. I love the rose gold details. The art was beautiful, of course. The interior design, magnificent. I spent a solid 30 minutes there. It is a pretty popular tourist attraction, and they leave it open for tourists to come in, free range, go in, go out whenever you like. I did walk around Lucerne. I felt like the city was very fairy tale cottage vibes, and I loved seeing the murals on the buildings. It was just so cool to see. There were several markets happening outdoors as well, which was fun to walk through. I did check out a second church. This one was the Roman Catholic Church of Saint Leo Dagger. Sorry if I butchered that as well. This one was actually the one that rang the church bells on the top of the hour, so really cool to see. This church was more so Renaissance and Gothic architecture, so it had a different vibe from the last church you just saw, but it was just is beautiful, it just in a different way. This one also was pretty friendly to tourists. You could walk in, walk out whenever, and there wasn't anyone like managing where you go in and out of. After leaving that church, I set off to find one of the murals that I saw online. I did have to Google Maps it. It was a little difficult to find, not gonna lie, because my dumb self actually passed the mural twice and didn't turn around to see it was behind me. It was down like an alley that had other little art shops and studios. I think the piece really adds to the art culture of Lucerne, so definitely check it out. It was really cool to see how it mirrored the actual buildings in the alleyway. Of course, you got to check out the shops as any good tourist would do. Watches everywhere. That's just what Switzerland is known for. Chocolate and watches. Swiss Army knives, of course, other things as well. After doing a little bit of shopping, I headed back down to Lake Lucerne just to check out the swans and chill and wait for the tour group. And when we met back up, we actually took a boat across Lake Lucerne and headed to Mount Rigi, which was top tier experience. Loved it. Of course, on the boat, you could order drinks, have food. From what I remember, the boat ride was like about an hour, nothing too crazy. The boat does take you to different stops to explore the Alps, but we went directly to Mount Rigi and we took a cog railway up the mountain because, you know, we're traveling with like 50 other people. So hiking up the mountain wasn't an option, but if you go on your own, that definitely is something that you could do. Super chill. Oh my God, the most beautiful views because of course Lake Lucerne is surrounding you. There's greenery, there's farmlands, there's beautiful, beautiful cattle with bells on their necks. It was so cute. Honestly, out of this world. I thought I was in heaven. I thought I died and I went to heaven and I wanted to stay there forever. When we got to the top, you could actually hike up to their tower, which is like the highest point of Mount Rigi. It was a slightly cloudy day on one side, but very beautiful on the other. Definitely got a lot of good shots here. It was the vibes. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Now I was with the tour group and they did book a experience to do Swiss fondue. So we did get to do that. There was like 2 buildings down the mountain that you could stop at. And then there were like other lodges that people stay at as well. We did stop at one of the restaurants and they had it all booked out for the tour. And we got to experience some Swiss fondue. At this restaurant, there was the cutest couple who performed and showed us some yodeling as well as some traditional music. There's just not a more wholesome moment than this. Stunning, loved it. They even had some of us partake in the yodeling. I did not because your girl's a little shy. Other people did and it was really cute. The last experience was our dinner and pretty much the end of the day. We went back down the cog railway and headed to our hotel for the night to then conclude our little Switzerland adventure because the next day we headed straight to Italy. I feel like this was a really good sampler of what Switzerland has to offer. I definitely want to go back and see more things outside of just Zurich and Lucerne because I know there's like awesome, amazing hikes and outdoor activities. So that will be going on our bucket list. Stay tuned for those videos. Although this was only 2 days in Switzerland, do not fret. We will be back. For this trip specifically, I still had 8 more days in my trip in Europe and 4 more countries to see. The next stop is Italy. So stay tuned for that adventure. Who doesn't love Italy? Don't forget to subscribe and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.